Hey everybody. Alright, check this out. Today, in this video, I'm going to teach you guys what I call the 3 amigos of hand-painted distress, damage, and weathering. Now, these are weathering techniques that you can apply to anything. They work on scale models of any scale. They work on Warhammer figures. They work on post-apocalyptic prop and costume. So anything you want to look shitty by hand painting it, this is the stuff you do. I have personally worked with weathering powders, with Fuller's Earth, with rust paint. I like all of those tools, but they are messy tools. And honestly, I always go back to hand painting because hand painting brings me the most joy. I have the most fun doing it. It's the most relaxing. So, the 3 amigos are sun damage to paint, scratches from battle damage, and carbon scoring or carbon searing on hot pipes. So what we have here in our little picture is we're going to put a scratch on this drawing of a red car door. We're going to do sun damage on this splotch of gray primer. And we're going to paint this pipe to look like it has carbon emissions on it. And we're going to do it on these surfaces because these surfaces are super visible. A lot of times when I try to paint an object in real time, you end up fighting the camera trying to paint it and show it off at the same time. So I'm going to show some examples of how this went down at the end of the video. For now, we're just going to paint the objects in the most visible way possible to create the best tutorial. So, for our first trick, we're going to do sun damage to paint. So if you have a metallic object, like a car, that has a flat coat of paint on it, that has been left out in the weather for decades, and the sun has damaged the paint, faded it, and generally fucked it up, this is what that process is going to simulate. So we're going to paint this swatch of gray as sun damaged car, and we're going to use a baby blue color. Now this paint that we're using specifically, Anita's all-purpose acrylic craft paint, this is just cheapo powder pigment craft paint that you can buy anywhere. So we're going to use this paint specifically because it has powder pigment. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put the this palette in frame because this is the important part. I'm going to squeeze out a gooey chunk of this funky paint, and it is funky, cheap paint. And I'm going to dilute it with water. And what we want to do is we want to add so much water to the paint that we can literally see the paint coming apart in real time. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to halo the paint with the water because I want you to be able to see this paint come apart. Powder pigment basically means that the color of the paint is in a powder. It's in a dry form. There are different kinds of pigments in paint. There are liquid pigment and powder pigment. So now that I have some water haloed around this paint splotch, I'm going to start pulling paint out of the splotch. And as you can see, this paint doesn't really mix well in the water. And the reason it's not mixing well is because that's the nature of powder pigment. You can see that I've kind of created those like, it almost looks like satellite photography. It looks like aerial photography of like a swamp or like a something on a map. Or maybe like a high-res photo of the universe or whatever. So in these parts right here, I'm pointing to the brush. You can see how the paint is chunking up and falling apart. This is what we want. It's especially evident down here when I drag it over the orange, and you can see it in the contrast. You can see these chunky spots where the paint is just falling apart in the water. So that's what we want, and that's why we're using this paint, because normally this would be a very unattractive process. We would not want our paint to do this. We want our paint to be smooth and to have even color saturation, no matter how much we dilute it. Now, that is something that liquid pigment paint does, that water pigment paint doesn't. But we especially want the paint to fall apart right now and do this. So, we're going to put our brush in the chunks. We want this chunky falling apart paint, and we're going to apply it to the car. In this case, which is just the swatch. Now, the other thing about this is I don't like to paint it on with actual brush strokes. I like to show an organic texture that is more evidence of damage. So we have the paint that's coming apart in the water. And as you can see, we have this uneven, naturally occurring strange texture that just looks like it's been beat and under the weather. And that is how we make sun-damaged paint. As this dries and dries unevenly, this color will look exactly like it has been sitting out in the sun for 10, 20, 30 years, and the color pigment in the paint has decayed, it has been damaged. You know, the clear top coat has flaked off and is no longer protecting the car. And we can see gray primer through this because it's not completely opaque because of the amount of water that's diluting it. We want to be able to see the primer under the paint because it's going to tell a story. It's going to tell the history of this vehicle, that at some point somebody did try to paint this car and they cared about it, but they died in the apocalypse or whatever, and this car has been sitting here for 30 years since then. So that's more or less the sun damage trick, which is very simple. Don't worry, everything here is going to be simple. So we're going to leave that for a while to dry. And that's why we did it first, because that's the technique that has the most drying time. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to look at how to paint realistic battle damage and scratches. Now, a lot of people will just take metallic paint and they'll just dry brush scrapes on the leading edges. That doesn't actually simulate the damage that happens to any paint you might have on a metallic object when you go to do that. This is an equally easy process, but it has way better results. So the first thing we're going to do to simulate a scratch, a paint-on scratch, is we are going to pick the highlight color for this car door. So this car door is red, which means we want a highlight color that's like a slightly brighter red with a tinge of white in it. However, because I want this to be super visible and easy to see, I am just going to do something different. I'm going to go way up the color wheel and I'm going to highlight with orange. Now, I don't recommend this. I'm only picking a color that's radically different from the red of this car door because I want it to be visible for the sake of the tutorial. Normally, when I actually do this on a prop or a model, I would go, my highlight would be like one shade lighter than what is the standard color. So let's make like a death claw mark. So this is going to be the shape of our scratch. And again, I'm doing this in orange because it's going to be easier to see than doing it in like the actual red I would want to do it in. Just for the sake of the tutorial. So we painted some vertical lines on the car, and that's going to be like a death claw, like a bear claw or whatever, scratching it. Now the alternative we can do is I'm going to take a dry brush and I'm going to make an organic shape too. So we'll put a couple of those on there. Just splotch them on with the brush, just to see them, see different shapes, just attacking the surface in different ways. So we're gonna hope that's dry. The next thing that's going to happen is we're going to make the actual scratch itself. And for that I am using black paint. So I have this black paint here, which is out of frame. So now what you want to do is, and I'm going to start with our Deathclaw scratches, is you want to ride the black line of the scratch all the way up to the edge of the highlight. So we're going right on top of this, not red. You know, it's orange, but we're pretending it's highlight red. And this is actually going to be our scratch. And so we're going to paint black all the way in to this scratch, and it's going to be like the orange highlight color around it is going to be like an outline, because what that orange highlight color represents is where the paint is actually lifting off the surface of the piece of metal at the edge of the scratch. Now, so that stuff was easy. Now I'm going to go in and find other little bits where I had done the organic stuff earlier, the organic shape, and this can be you know, dings, dents, scratches that occur from rough terrain throwing up stuff like gravel and small stones that damages the paintwork, the surface of the car, bullet holes, scorch marks, things of that nature. A lot of fun ways to do it. So that's the black. We allow the black to dry, which we will not do for the sake of the tutorial because we're just moving right along. I'm going to take some silver paint. Now, for the silver paint, you want a bright color silver because the idea is that the scratch is fresh. This is going to be fresh damage, meaning that the metal that is exposed by the scratch is going to be clean. It hasn't been exposed to the environment for a long enough time yet to rust. So what we're going to do now is, just like we painted the black in, as like with the orange being the outline, we wrote it right to the line. The silver is going to ride right to the line of the black. We only want to see enough black to pop the contrast and realize that the scratch is there. So I'm doing that like so. So there should be a thin highlight line. That's one shade off of the color. And then there should be a thin black line. And then the interior of the scratch, the actual naked metal itself, will be our metallic color, our steel color. So painting that in. You can't see the metallic where it is in the camera right now. Don't worry, I'll lift up the piece of paper and show you. And then come back in like so. On all the other shit. And then for the sake of finishing it up, I'll paint the door handles and the window gasket, the frame here, with some silver too. Blah blah blah. All right. So this is mostly dry now. We're gonna cut back here for a second to the sun damage. Let's put a lot of light on this right now. I just want you guys to be able to see it. You can see some parts are still wet and shiny from the light, but you can see that how this blue paint has dried funky and unevenly, and that looks like sun damage. That's sun damage. All you got to do is just buy crappy paint and then dilute it with water until it falls apart. You're good to go. Now, let's go back to looking at our scratches. Now you can get a better idea of what we're talking about here. So you can see that silver paint is still a little wet, but it's highlight line, very thin. Black line, very thin. Paint in the interior of the scratch, metallic. Done. So you can see, I'll show more samples at the end of the video. So there's a car where we've done that. This car has actually received the sun damage technique and the scratch painting technique, and it has also received the technique we're going to talk about now, which is the last of the three Amigos, carbon searing. Now, this is an awesome technique because again, just like all the other three Amigos, it works on at any scale. You can do it on anything. So the first thing we're going to do for carbon searing is I'm going to take some brown paint and I'm going to run the brown about halfway down the pipe from the opening that is creating the flame, which is either going to be exhaust, the explosion coming out of a gun barrel, an energy beam, whatever. This works in apocalyptica. This works in science fiction. This is just a it's established canon that if you have a pipe that's shooting out some kind of emission in a science fiction universe, it must be nasty and dirty. It's just a rule. So we're going about halfway down the length of the pipe from the orifice, from the opening of the pipe, with brown. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get some black paint. I picked up the silver there. And we are going to go, I'm just going to use this directly as a palette right here. The piece of paper, sorry, it's still out of frame. And we are going to go halfway down the brown from that. So each operation is going to be like a half-life. And you want to be dry brushing. I'll feather some of this out a little so it blends. There we go, that's a good look. So what we have here is the brown is going to represent the dried, caked on filth, the stuff that's been there for a long time and has washed back and is just existing, living its best life. Whereas the black is closer to the opening. It's the actual, like, just black chemical funky soot. This is the actual smoke staining. Now, as we get closer and closer to the pipe, we're going to see more chemicals that have been cooked on and are making all kinds of different oily iridescent colors. So in order to represent that, we're going to start with silver. And again, I'm just going halfway down. The black went halfway down the brown. The silver is going halfway down the black. Now again, just because of the way the camera is angled, it's difficult to see the silver, the opacity of the silver covering the black. So as you can see, we kind of already have like a, we've taken this picture of an exhaust pipe and kind of turned it into a cigarette butt. If you imagine, there's a big black hole right there where my finger was, where it used to be when it was Sharpie, and that was the, I should just paint it back on. And that was the hole in the pipe where the smog is coming out. All right. We have our hole in our pipe again. Again, I will show examples at the end of the stream. Sorry, the end of the video. Using the same software to capture it that I do for streaming. But we're making these. We're making funky ass carbon seared hot rod pipes. And this is something you're going to be able to do on anything at any size. Whether it's a prop gun, or a Hot Wheels car, or a Warhammer model, whatever. Okay, so this is the only step that is any kind of difficult, and it's still not difficult. What I have right here is Drakenhof Nightshade. This is Citadel color. If you're not a Warhammer nerd, this is Warhammer nerd paint. This is a totally different animal. But basically what this is, if you are familiar with art, this is we're going to do a wash or a glaze technique. Which is, that's just what painting is. Drakenhof Nightshade is, of course, a brand name. It's a trademark. Games Workshop, when they make their paints, they name them goofy names that are copyrightable. So, you have this weird vampire word, Drakenhof, that, it's just a word they made up. It doesn't exist. So what this is this is a blue or purple tinted glaze. And we're going to use that to tint the color of the steel here, because we want to have a blue tint or a purple tint to have the iridescent color of the chemical wash that's happening on the pipe. So we're going to use this product, But if you don't have access to this product, you can water down purple or blue paint and do the same thing. So hopefully, by the way, this isn't completely dry yet, so the results are going to be a little wacky. And also because paper is, innately porous, and we're not I'm literally pulling up all the metallic paint because it wasn't dry yet either. But this is just going to be the nature of this monster. Doing the tutorial on media that it's not actually meant to be done on, because this is supposed to be for prop and model. Let's take a look again at some of the vehicles that we've actually done this on, some of our examples. Here's one with a purple tint. Drakenhof Nightshade is more blue, but you can see those pipes are tinted purple. That's that's the wash painted over the steel. And here's another guy. This one also had a purple tint. He's got this big gnarly pipe coming out of the rear end here. I'm going to try to wick away some of this stuff. Okay. May or may not have worked. The proof will be at the end when I show you the examples. So, that's that. Now the final step is we go back with the silver and we just highlight the edge of the pipe. The actual last 1 millimeter, the actual just edge of the pipe should be perfectly clean, because all the chemicals that would be settling on that pipe are being immediately washed off and baked off by the flame. So that's just going to be a ring of pure steel. Okay, so these are the 3 Amigos. And anybody can do these anytime on any prop, model, or cosplay item. Any Warhammer figure, any Hot Wheels car, any 125 scale model, any scale model, these all apply. Anything that you can do this to, it will work on it. So we have water dilution, sun damage on paint. We have paint on scratches, and we have carbon searing on exhaust pipes, energy weapon pipes, gun barrels, what have you. This looks especially dope on miniguns. If you have like a prop minigun and you don't do this to the barrels, you have failed your prop artist community. You have done fucked up. This is mandatory on minigun barrels. All right. So what I'm going to do now, after showing off the 3 Amigos, is I'm going to go into my editing software and I'm going to show pictures of not a lot of props. I don't have a lot. I'm not a prop weapon guy at when I go to my costume and prop shit. I don't like carrying that crap around at festivals. So I don't have a lot of prop weapons to show these techniques off on. But what I do have are a bunch of scale models and Hot Wheels cars that you will be able to see this stuff in action, because like I said, it works at any scale. You can do this to prop and costume. You can do this to any scale of model. You can do it to Warhammer figures, whatever the fuck. It all works. It always works. It's just a matter of scale. So I'm going to turn this thing off, and then there's going to be a crawl. There's going to be montage of scale model projects that have all been painted using the 3 Amigos technique.